right, let's jump in. Tim and I are really excited to be on stage here together to talk to you guys about a lot of innovations that have been done in the area of TV attribution and measurement. And we really want to talk to you guys today how iSpot and TripAdvisor came together to solve a major problem in the measurement and the optimization and the analysis of TV advertising. So just brief intros. I'm Sean Mueller, founder and CEO of iSpot. At iSpot, we measure TV advertising in real time. We measure impressions, attention, and conversion. We do this for all TV advertisers all the time. So we have over 12,000 TV advertisers, 700,000 ads that we're tracking in real time, 24/7. We have over 200 brand clients that use us for measurement and attribution. Of course, TripAdvisor being one of those really great forward-thinking brands that we really like to have push us. And then we also have major platform integrations with the like of Oracle, LiveRamp, Adobe to really make that connection between television and digital very seamless. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tim.
Hello, everyone. I'm TimDAuria. I oversee TV media optimization at TripAdvisor. So just a little bit about TripAdvisor for folks that don't know some of the background. So we were founded in the year 2000. We're up just outside of Boston, Needham, Massachusetts. And we're a global company. We have 455 million plus average monthly visitors to our site, about 600 million plus reviews on content on the site, and make about 1.5 billion per year in annual revenue. So a very large global company. And the interesting thing that I found very unique about TripAdvisor is that most of this growth was done on the heels of digital advertising. It wasn't until around 2013 that we first dipped our toes into the water, into television. And I think you'll see in this presentation why that is and some of the challenges that we saw before we got into television. So Steve Kaufer, the CEO of TripAdvisor, has two mottos that he instills on us. The first is speed wins. So do everything as quickly as possible, get things done. And the second is this one right here. If it's worth doing, it's worth measuring. And this actually captures some of the challenges that we saw with offline media, television in particular. So Steve is has somewhat of an engineering background, and he likes to understand how the dots connect, how you get from point A to point B. If I put $1 into something, I want to know exactly how many dollars if I come out. As a matter of fact, he'd say if I put a penny into something, I want to understand how many pennies am I getting out. And so that need for very clear, direct down the funnel attribution is one of the inhibiting factors was one of the inhibiting factors for television, and I think explains why we've spent so much time on the digital side. And so when I got involved with TV, my goal was to help connect the dots, and that's actually what led to me reaching out to iSpot. So one of the large measurement challenges, when I say direct down the funnel attribution, is trying to understand the causal impact of our TV campaigns. So it's easy to see correlations. So for example, if I start spending money and putting money into a certain network, we might be able to see folks coming into the site along the lines of where we put the ads. But how do I know exactly how many of those folks would have come to our site anyway, even if our ad did not run? So correlation doesn't cut it. We need to understand dollar in, how much am I actually getting from the ads versus if I had not run those ads. But we have to take this a step back because there's actually some foundational pieces that need to be put in place before we could get to causal attribution.
Yeah, so I hear a lot of people talking about attribution and very little talk about the quality of the data that's actually going into these models, which is hugely important. There's a lot of new data sets available around television. Most of them are very raw. They've not been put through the rigor. There's lots of holes in them, and it's really important before you put something into a model to ensure the accuracy of the data. So we've all heard about set-top box data and ACR data sets coming on the market. Most of those data sets are pretty raw, and it takes a lot of time, capital, and effort to make those data sets usable in attribution or in any other kind of measurement. So what we've done at iSpot is we've really put together 6 distinct data sets that allow us to cross-calibrate them together and come up with what is the most accurate measurement of TV that's connectable to business outcome, because that is an important notion. So we start with a catalog of all TV advertising, along with real-time airing schedules, along with smart TV data for both the ads and the content viewing, and then layer in census data as well as device graph and demographic data. And this is the engine that creates a data set that is actually measurement grade, is what we call it. So what you want to put into your model is not data, but measurement grade data, meaning data that's been vetted, validated, looked at. It's been built into products. The market has accepted it. The market has audited it, is testing it. Because otherwise, you're going to get garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out is right. And so Sean, when we first started talking with iSpot, Sean said much the same. And basically my response was, yeah, right, I'll believe when I see it, that you've been able to integrate this data and you have high quality. And so when we started working with them, most of the upfront time in the initial collaboration had nothing to do with measurement. It had everything to do with vetting and kicking the tires on the data. Most of the data sets that we see, that at least I see in this industry, just are not good quality. And as Sean said, garbage in, garbage out. And so you really have to step up your game on the data input side, the quality side, in order for the measurement to work well. And so some of the initial checks, and this is just a small sample, I originally had a list of about, that like would fill out a couple of these slides, and we decided to cut it down to this list. So just a couple of questions is, what is the matching rate between the iSpot detections and post logs, what we know run? What is the data latency? So how quickly are we actually getting information on an ongoing, sustained basis? How do the metrics that we see through the iSpot platform compare with other sources? And then if we see differences, and of course you're going to see differences, how can we explain those differences? And of course, across all of these areas, particularly the match rate, comparing with other sources, you're going to see disagreement. And so the big question is, how do those disagreements get resolved, and can you understand what's causing that disagreement? And when we actually decided to actually finally move forward with iSpot, we had a really good handling of what this data was that we were getting. We didn't actually figure out the measurement side piece until later on, because we felt that, hey, if you didn't have good input, there's no value in really doing the measure. So with the data quality being solid based on the assessment that I did and my team did, now we move on to the attribution question. So this is a hypothetical example of, it could be a valid example, but it could apply to any network. I just selected HGTV and ION randomly. And so the question is, so TripAdvisor is a global company. Most folks in the United States already use us. I'll use the US as an example. So if I were to say hypothetically run not a TripAdvisor ad, but say some public service announcement ad on television across all the different networks out there, and I were to measure how many folks that saw those ads came into our site, what would I see? So a lot of technology out there would make the assumption that any folks that come in immediately after an ad airing, you have to attribute to it. So therefore they're assuming that there's zero lift if you were to run, say, someone else's ad that isn't yours. And that's obviously not the case. And so how do I know for sure that we just don't have an abundance of our customers who happen to watch HGTV? And so as soon as we start launching ads and we measure who comes into the site after seeing their ad, if we already have an abundance of folks that use our product that watch HGTV, it'll look like those ads on HGTV are driving value, when in fact it's just a correlation. It just so happens that people that use our site happen to watch HGTV more frequently. And so the question goes back to, what is my ad actually doing? Where are my dollars best placed to yield new value, not just repeat value or correlations, various correlations that we see in the data? So there's a couple of ways there are actually a lot of approaches to doing this. Most of them are just not practical or not ethical. For example, you can't it's very true. You can't force only a random subset of people to watch your ads like pharmaceutical drug trials do. And it's expensive and copyright problems if you were to try to run someone else's ad in place of your own. So that design doesn't work. So what we ended up doing was leaning into basically a technique that's really pushed by Gary King over at Harvard, which is essentially called causal attribution or causal inference. And what this does is it says, all right, there's no way we could actually create a controlled experiment. So what we're going to do is let our ads just run wherever they are in market, and then we're going to work backwards to find subsets of people that really are controls of one another, meaning that they look identical in every way, shape, or form that we can tell, the only exception being this person or this household or this group here received our ad, and this nearly identical group didn't receive our ad. And if you could do that well, to the point where you actually have these groupings that are identical in every way, with the exception being that one saw your ad and the other didn't, any difference, any performance difference that you see between these two groups are attributable 100% to television, or to whatever treatment it is you're applying. And so that's the way that we set about going about this problem.
Yeah, so how do we actually do this? How do we create these control groups? We like to kind of equate it to the process of valuing or appraising a home, right? So let's say you have a home that you're trying to appraise. You're trying to understand its value, and unless the home was sold recently, you sort of don't know its value. So what do? You essentially create a control group. You look for as close to as similar as homes as possible. In an ideal world, you'd have the exact same home with the exact same number of square feet and bedrooms, and it looks the same, it smells the same, it was built the same year, and it's in the exact same, literally the same location. But typically that's hard to do. So you look for homes that are very similar, right? So they have similar square footage, they have similar bedrooms, they were built in a similar year, they're kind of in a similar neighborhood, right? And you build that control group, and based on that control group, you can assess the value of the home. So we essentially do the same thing for TripAdvisor ads running on any given network. So let's say we're trying to assess the value of TripAdvisor ads running on HDTV, right? So what we do is we say, here's all the devices and people that we know that watch HGTV, were exposed to a TripAdvisor ad, and visited the TripAdvisor website within 7 days in this particular example. So now we work our way backwards. Let's find other people, consumers, devices, and households that generally watch HGTV. They have visited TripAdvisor but have not been exposed to the ad, but they also watch the same amount of television, and they were also exposed to the same number of competitor ads. And so now we have a very, very similar control group based on which we can assess the value of the ads on HGTV. So in other words, we can look at the correlation, or what we call the conversion rate, between the control group, and then the increase in the conversion rate is the lift between the exposed group on HGTV. And now we can do that on every network and day part and really start understanding the causal impact. And here's some quick sort of examples here.
Yeah, so this is an example. So initially when we started this analysis, what we did is we started running television ads, and then we tracked what the conversion rate and how many folks came in on different ads on our site. So we're looking here at television networks and folks coming into the site at what rate of conversion who have seen one of our ads on each of the networks. The challenge, though, is how do I know that those folks wouldn't have come had we not run the ads, or had we run just some spurious ad that had nothing to do with TripAdvisor? And so for that, we're basically building these control groups, just like what Sean said, that look identical in every way. The only difference is that they haven't seen our ad, and that's what's showing here as the dark bar in each of these cases. So what those dark bars represent is the conversion rate, or the number of conversions that we would have seen from folks that watch those networks, but who did not see our ad. And then the brighter bars that are right next to it are the ones who did see our ad. And the incremental value, the causal value of television, is the delta between those two bars. It's not the actual bar heights themselves, it's the difference. Most of the tools out there and most of the techniques out there would incorrectly assume that the light blue bars is the value of television or is close to the value of TV. It's really just the delta. And what's important about that, aside from the valuation being very different, being off from one another, is it leads to very different buying decisions. So it turns out that putting your dollars where you already have an abundance of your audience may not necessarily be the best investment. Perhaps you need to be opening up new markets or exposing new audiences to your message. And so for that reason, you see that the bars that light up here, this is just the difference between those two bars, the incremental gain. It gives us a different set of networks lighting up as the ones that are actually generating the most value for every dollar that we put in. And so that is really where the value is. And this is kind of going back to Steve Kaufer's philosophy, if it's worth doing, it's worth measuring. This is now allowing us to connect the dots between a dollar being put in, and here's exactly the dollars that we're getting out and who's generating those dollars for us.
So I think we're out of time, so quick wrap up here.
So this, of course, has changed how we're buying. So television ads don't necessarily or have a different impact, a causal impact on different networks than what would initially lead you to believe if you didn't do the controlling. There's a lot of validation that goes into this, so we often find that similar networks cluster together, which is just more corroborating evidence for this. And obviously, this allows us to now decide where to increase and decrease our spends. And I go beyond this, and I just add 2 more points. 2 big takeaways I get from this presentation is the value of the data and the quality of the data going in is critical, and then validating the model afterwards is the other critical piece. So validation on the front end and the back end to prove to yourself that it actually works correctly and that you're measuring correctly is paramount. Otherwise you're not going to be able to connect those dots.
Perfect. And with that, here's just a final wrap up. We're not getting pulled off stage here, even though the clock is at 0. So just a few takeaways from our perspective. If it's worth doing, it's worth measuring. So I think that is a great sort of approach to business in general. There's a difference between data and measurement and the inputs into the model. Drilling into causation and not just correlation is very, very critical. And the validation, to Tim's point, of the data inputs and outputs is absolutely crucial to doing this correctly. And thank you very much.
Thank you.